Ryan's blind date took one look at his prosthetic leg and left before he could say hello. 30 seconds was apparently all the time he deserved, so when the alien woman with soldier's eyes asked to sit down, he figured the night could not get any worse. The bar had been Ryan's refuge for years now. He ordered whiskey in threes, a drink from each of his unit mates who hadn't made it home. Tonight was different. A new table across the room held promising a chance at something more than stale air and regret, until her eyes widened ever so slightly as they landed on him. Her heels clicked sharply against the floorboards before retreating in 2 quick steps. Ryan slumped back into his chair, watching the door until it swung shut behind her. A new waitress set a fresh glass of whiskey down next to an empty plate he hadn't noticed moments ago. He stared at it for another long minute before picking up one of the glasses and tossing it back without tasting it. When was enough? The shadow from the doorway fell over his table, casting his drink in darkness. Ryan's gaze shot upward to find a violet-skinned woman looking down at him with an intensity that spoke louder than any words could manage. Commander Vex'ara Nighthollow, she introduced herself without preamble, her voice smooth and controlled despite whatever tumultuous thoughts seemed to simmer behind those piercing amber eyes. "You look like you could use company." Ryan, he muttered back automatically, the formal title catching in his throat before it emerged as a simple name. She did not flinch from his curt response, but extended one perfectly sculpted hand towards him with an odd grace for her imposing frame. It was clear she had seen worse and expected no less of herself or those around her. A silent moment stretched out between them, filled only by the soft hum of Christmas carols playing over the bar's speakers. Ryan stared at her gloved fingers for a long beat before sliding his own into a firm grip, part courtesy, part reflexive instinct born from years in combat. Her skin was cool beneath the thin material, and surprisingly calloused despite an otherwise refined appearance that belied any manual labor. "What are you doing here?" he found himself asking. Vex'ara's jaw tightened ever so slightly as she let go of his hand, fingers curling into a fist before releasing once more with practiced control. "I could ask the same," came her guarded reply. Her eyes drifted to the empty seat across from him, a silent question that hung between them unanswered for another long moment. He should have said no. It was too much like what had tried all those years, awkward, forced encounters where someone else decided it would be nice if Ryan had a life outside of his own broken edges. But there she stood, with the haunted eyes and military bearing that spoke of battles fought just as grimly as any he remembered. Ryan swallowed thickly before nodding once more to himself, and then in her direction. "Sit." She did so without hesitation or fanfare, settling herself gracefully despite how out of place she looked amid human patrons. The waitress returned with another round of drinks for the both of them, but said nothing about their unusual pairing. Ryan didn't offer a reason. There was no explanation he could give. Vex'ara's gaze swept around him once more before fixing back on his face, an expectant silence filling that space between them again. "You are not from here," she started hesitantly, after another beat, clearly struggling with how to bridge the divide of their worlds so vastly different yet equally haunted by loss. Ryan scoffed softly, shaking his head as if clearing cobwebs out of long-ignored corners of thought and memory. "My leg doesn't belong on Earth anymore either," he answered dryly, though there was something more than just bitterness underlying his tone now. Something flickered deep within Vex'ara's eyes at that tone, part shared understanding perhaps, and another still grappling with the same raw pain she felt in her bones every waking hour. She nodded slowly, as if accepting some internal truth only known to her. "I understand," was all she said for a moment before turning more fully towards him over their drinks. "Tell me about your war." He stared at her, startled by both the request and its implications, but there was also something in how she asked that made it impossible not to comply. So Ryan began speaking without even realizing had started words spilling out freely of memories long buried beneath his tough exterior, but now finding solace here with this alien stranger who had somehow cut through all pretense. Hours later, when the bar closed and everyone else had gone home wrapped in their own lives or loneliness, Vex'ara was still there listening. The whiskey glasses had been replaced by coffee cups as they transitioned from stories of battle to quieter reflections shared over quiet hums of music. And somewhere along that path between heartache and camaraderie, Ryan began seeing the world differently. As he stood up finally to leave, wrapping his coat around him against the cold evening air creeping in through closed windows, Vex'ara followed suit, but paused halfway across the room toward her own exit. "Ryan," she called out softly before turning back fully towards him. "Would you like to be my partner?" It was a question asked with no small amount of bravery and mutual vulnerability laid bare at souls grappling for something beyond war's wreckage. He stared at her in quiet shock until he saw the same flicker of hope mingling nervously alongside doubt. "All right," Ryan replied finally, his voice rough yet firm as he stepped forward to meet her where she stood waiting uncertainly by the door. "Let's see what happens." And so they left together into a new Christmas Eve neither could have anticipated or fully understood until this moment had unfolded in its unexpected light. The dimly lit bar was filled with muted conversations and soft laughter as patrons drank away their holiday loneliness. Ryan Mitchell sat alone at a corner table, his eyes fixed on the entrance door, like he expected someone to walk in and write out again, just another failed date statistic. Then she stepped through that very doorway. Commander Vex'ara Nighthollow moved with an elegance barely contained by her slightly oversized human clothing. Her gaze swept around the room once before settling squarely onto Ryan, as if there were no other place for it to be. She walked over confidently and sat down across from him without a word. The waitress returned promptly, setting 2 more drinks in front of them, while avoiding eye contact, a tacit acknowledgement that any conversation was private business best left untouched. Ryan's lips quirked into an involuntary smirk as he looked up at her, the corners of his eyes crinkling slightly. "Sit," he ordered without malice, just a soldier's instinct to command when faced with uncertain terrain. Vex'ara did so without hesitation, settling herself gracefully despite how out of place she appeared among human patrons. Expectant silence filled that space between them as they sized each other up beneath the amber glow of hanging lights above their table. "You are not from here," Vex'ara started hesitantly, after another beat, her deep violet skin a stark contrast to the warm wooden bar surroundings. "But your legate doesn't belong on Earth either." Ryan's gaze sharpened briefly before his expression softened into something more akin to understanding than bitterness. He took a sip of whiskey and set the glass down slowly. "My unit left me behind," he said, voice rough with years of unspoken truths. The silence hung between them as she nodded solemnly in return, recognizing the weight of those words without needing explanation. "Tell me about your war." Ryan stared at her for a moment, startled by both the request and its implications, a rare chance to open up wounds he had meticulously sealed away since returning from active duty 3 years ago. But there was something in how she asked that made it impossible not to comply. His eyes softened as his defenses crumbled. "I lost friends," Ryan began softly, reaching down to rub a thumb over the faded scars on his prosthetic leg, a physical reminder of what remained unfinished and unfulfilled within him. "Men who thought I had their backs." Vex'ara's gaze never wavered. She listened intently as he recounted tales filled with death, destruction, and survival stories where every victory came at too steep a cost to truly celebrate. "I lost everyone in my unit," Vex'ara admitted quietly, after several minutes of his retelling. "They all died because I couldn't keep them safe." Ryan's eyes widened slightly at her admission, the stark resemblance of their traumas clear even across alien boundaries. A long moment passed between them as they found common ground in shared sorrow and unspoken regrets. As if sensing he needed it more than ever before, Vex'ara reached out a hand toward him, a subtle gesture offering connection without demanding anything in return. "You are not alone," she said simply, but with an authority that belied her words' profundity. Ryan looked down at the proffered hand for a long moment, his heart heavy yet somehow lighter now, because there was someone who understood, so willing to offer companionship despite all differences and distances between them. With great deliberation, he reached out, their fingers brushing lightly, in an unspoken pact of mutual support and silent understanding. The night wore on with stories spilling forth freely from both sides, tales of bad officers, worse food rations, the way silence sounds after battle, a symphony composed entirely of loss and loneliness shared over whiskey and coffee cups. The bar gradually emptied around them until only their quiet hums filled the space between two broken warriors finding unexpected kinship. As closing time approached, and the last patrons shuffled out into the cold Christmas Eve night air creeping in through closed windows, Ryan stood up to leave, but Vex'ara followed suit, pausing halfway across the room toward her own exit. "Ryan," she called softly before turning back fully towards him. Her eyes held a mixture of hope and vulnerability, as if daring fate for once to break their fragile connection rather than them tearing it apart themselves out of caution or mistrust. "Would you like to be my partner?" It was the bravest thing he had seen all night, a human facing uncertainty with an open heart towards someone so fundamentally the other. He stared at her in quiet shock, his breath catching somewhere between disbelief and deep longing for something beyond war's wreckage. The same flicker of hope mingling nervously alongside doubt shone back from Vex'ara as she waited uncertainly by the door. "All right," Ryan replied finally, voice rough yet firm, as he stepped forward to meet her where she stood waiting with an expression full of equal parts fear and possibility. "Let's see what happens." And so they left together into a new Christmas Eve neither could have anticipated or fully understood until this moment had unfolded in its unexpected light. Their steps were silent against the cold night streets as Ryan led Vex'ara back to her temporary apartment near downtown, both wrapped tightly in coats, and an unspoken promise that lingered between them like a whispered vow. The weight of their shared burdens seemed lighter now, carried together rather than alone under starless skies. As they reached Vex'ara's door, she turned towards him again with resolve shining brightly despite the fear lingering just beneath her surface calm. "This is different," she admitted softly, but without apology for voicing it aloud. "But maybe different doesn't have to mean bad." Ryan nodded slowly in understanding, his heart warming slightly at seeing that same recognition reflected back from her amber-iced warriors wounded by war, yet still willing to fight together for something better than either had ever hoped. "Maybe not," he agreed simply, though the weight of their new journey pressed heavily on both shoulders. "But let's take this step." With a deep breath and quiet nod, she opened her apartment door, inviting him inside, without asking questions about where things might lead, but ready to face whatever came next. Toj, Thirtwo souls grappling for something beyond war's wreckage, amidst the ruins of Christmases past. They stepped into their uncertain future as partners, each carrying not just scars, but hope, a light born from shared darkness, and unlikely companionship forged in moments few would ever understand or dare believe possible. The night outside was a tapestry of falling snow and whispering winds as Ryan led Vex'ara through empty city streets towards her temporary residence near downtown. The cold pressed against them, but it seemed less biting in the presence of mutual warmth they found in each other's company. Arriving at her door, she turned to face him once more, a mix of emotions playing across her features, hope and uncertainty entwined like the strands of fate itself. "This is different," she admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying enough weight for both of them to hear it clearly. Ryan nodded slowly, his gaze steady on hers as understanding dawned within him. He could see the fear lurking beneath her resolve, a mirror image of what he felt himself, but there was also something more profound, an unspoken promise and mutual determination to forge ahead despite everything they had lost. "Yeah," Ryan said quietly, after a moment's contemplation, his voice rough yet firm with renewed strength. Different doesn't have to mean bad. Vex'ara's eyes softened as she met his gaze fully. Her lips curved into a small but genuine smile, the first real one since that fateful night at the war memorial. She seemed reassured by Ryan's affirmation of her fears and uncertainties. Maybe not, she echoed back softly with renewed resolve in her voice, though it still held traces of apprehension. But maybe we can make something good out of this. Ryan's heart warmed slightly as he saw that same recognition reflected brightly from within Vex'ara's amber eyes, a light born from shared darkness and unlikely companionship forged amidst the ruins. Maybe, Ryan repeated with a nod, though it was clear both were ready to face whatever lay ahead together. He stepped forward, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. Let's take this step, he said firmly. With that tacit understanding between them, Vex'ara opened the door and invited him inside without further hesitation. The apartment was small but neatly kept, a stark contrast to her military bearing, a reminder of home in an alien world where she had yet to find footing. They entered silently, the atmosphere thick with potential, as they stood there for what felt like eternity before Vex'ara finally turned around and gestured towards a simple couch. She sat down first, patting the space beside her gently while looking at Ryan expectantly. Ryan hesitated only briefly before joining her on the couch, their shoulders touching ever so slightly in an unspoken acknowledgement of shared vulnerability. The room was quiet except for the sound of snowflakes hitting against windows and settling into piles outside. After a moment's silence, Vex'ara turned to face him more fully, her eyes searching his earnestly, as if seeking permission to share something profoundly personal. Ryan, she began cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper, there's one thing I need to tell you about the war, about Kellis Station. The name alone was enough for Ryan's heart to drop into his stomach, memories flooding back like cold water splashing over him all at once. Kellis Station, he echoed after a long pause. That place. Yes, Vex'ara continued with an involuntary shudder that betrayed more than she wanted to admit aloud. I was there too, on the other side. Ryan's jaw tightened, his grip on her couch armrests growing painfully tight as pieces began clicking into place within him. He could feel the weight of unspoken truths pressing down upon them both. Were you fighting against my unit? He asked quietly, after a few seconds more of silence. Vex'ara nodded solemnly without looking away from his eyes, acknowledging her role and the grim reality that lay between them now. Yes, she whispered simply, but with an intensity that spoke volumes about how much it meant to be truthful, even when painful. Ryan took another deep breath before speaking again, trying desperately not to let anger or bitterness cloud what they had started here tonight. And my bombs might have killed your commander? Yes, Vex'ara admitted, her voice barely a whisper now, but with unwavering honesty in every word and gesture. The weight of it settled heavily between them. They stared at each other across the 3 feet separating their bodies, and the 30,000 dead that separated their world's warriors from opposite sides, who had survived only to find one another here on Earth, where neither belonged fully yet both found a strange kinship in shared loss. Vex'ara spoke first this time. We were just following orders, she said softly, but with conviction. Surviving. Ryan looked at her long and hard, before nodding slowly, as understanding dawned within him like the breaking of dawn after night's darkest hour. No, he replied finally, his voice steady despite everything it carried now. It doesn't matter anymore. Vex'ara's eyes widened slightly, in surprise, but also with relief that she wasn't alone carrying this burden any longer, this weight that threatened to crush them both if left unspoken and unresolved. Their silence was filled instead then with mutual acceptance of what had happened back there, the recognition that moving forward together meant embracing not just hope, but honesty about their pasts. It might be too late for redemption or forgiveness in many ways, and yet perhaps it wasn't too late to start anew on this path they were walking now. As if sensing his thoughts, Vex'ara reached out gently and placed a hand over Ryan's where he still gripped the armrest so tightly with one last remnant of war's grip. She gave him a small squeeze, a silent promise she could keep far better than words ever could. "We can make something different," she repeated softly, but with renewed conviction now that they had faced this together and survived it. Ryan's eyes met hers once more, tired green reflecting back the resolve burning bright in her own amber gaze. "Yeah," he agreed finally, his voice steady despite everything between them now laid bare at last. "Think something different." And so their fragile bond solidified further under shared truths that neither had dared hope could bring them together like this, not as enemies, but potential partners, seeking solace and a future in each other's company. With renewed purpose, they rose from the couch side by side once more, wounded souls stepping forward into an uncertain dawn with only what was between them left to guide their path through uncharted territory. The night was calm and quiet at Ryan's apartment building, broken only by the soft hum of Christmas lights on display in neighboring homes. A few distant carolers sang songs that brought a fleeting wave of melancholy to both Vex'ara and Ryan as they stood up from their shared moment on the couch. There was no need for more words between them. Understanding had been established, acceptance had taken root, and now there was only forward motion. As if summoned by some unseen force, footsteps echoed down the hallway outside of his apartment door. Both Vex'ara and Ryan tensed simultaneously, their eyes meeting with a mix of wariness and mutual resolve before they turned to face the sound. The steps paused at the threshold, as if assessing whether it was safe to enter. "Staff Sergeant Mitchell," a gruff voice called out, not inviting so much as demanding an answer. "This is Colonel Webb." Ryan recognized the tone immediately. It belonged to his former commanding officer, who had since retired and now acted as something of a liaison between Earth's military and extraterrestrial counterparts assigned here for peacekeeping duties. Ryan sighed heavily before opening the door fully, revealing Colonel Webb standing there with an expression that could freeze water. He was dressed in civilian clothes, but carried himself like a soldier, always on duty, tall, imposing, eyes sharp as daggers under bushy white eyebrows that betrayed nothing of his thoughts, except perhaps their intensity and disapproval. "Colonel," Ryan greeted him stiffly, mentally bracing for whatever was coming next. Webb's gaze swept over the space before focusing sharply on Vex'ara. His mouth tightened into a grim line as he took in her unfamiliar features and alien attire, or lack thereof. He seemed to recognize immediately that she wasn't part of any diplomatic mission approved by his higher-ups, but an individual who had sought out Mitchell personal. Why, for reasons unbeknownst even to him. "What's going on here?" Webb demanded, voice dripping with disdain as he shifted into a more aggressive stance. "Who is this?" Ryan felt the weight of those words like physical blows against his chest, accusations and judgments that went back decades, but still stung fresh today. It was always easy for others to condemn him without understanding what led up to each decision, every action taken under pressure and in response to orders given during wartime. "Sir," Ryan began carefully, trying not to let the irritation show too much on his face or voice. "This is Commander Vex'ara Nighthollow. I know who she is." Webb snapped back harshly. He took another step forward into the apartment, as if daring either of them to stop him from getting closer despite Ryan's unspoken pleas for restraint. Vex'ara watched all this with her own set of unreadable emotions flickering behind amber eyes that had seen far too much death and destruction before. But when Webb stepped past their shared space, she moved instinctively in front of Ryan, protectively, without even consciously thinking about it. Her posture was rigid, almost threatening, as one hand slipped to rest near where a weapon used to reside at her side during times of war. "Commander," Webb acknowledged her with curt nod, though his gaze remained locked primarily on Mitchell's face for confirmation that he had indeed heard correctly what she represented here tonight: potential trouble or worse, betrayal given their shared history in conflict. "You shouldn't be involved with any personnel under my command." Ryan felt a sharp stab of resentment at those words aimed more toward him than her, but something else stirred within to her, reluctant respect and fierce loyalty that he couldn't suppress, even towards an officer who had never fully understood his battles fought beyond Earth's borders. Vex'ara turned slightly to look back at Ryan over her shoulder. Her gaze was steady, unwavering, as though seeing through him in ways no one else ever truly managed. "He is not the man you once knew," she stated simply, but with profound significance that reached far deeper than mere words could convey. Webb's eyes narrowed further, if possible, a sneer curling his lips now. He laughed harshly, though it held little humor for anyone present in this tense atmosphere thick with unspoken truths and unresolved pain from years past. "Protecting the man whose artillery killed your unit," he mocked cruelly, seemingly unable to grasp anything beyond surface appearances when faced with such a complex situation. Vex'ara did not flinch nor move away. Instead, she remained rooted firmly in place beside Mitchell while still standing guard between them. The weight of those accusations seemed lighter, somehow, knowing they came from someone who never truly understood her or Ryan's experiences and sacrifices made under pressure none could fathom without having walked their path too. "No," Vex'ara replied softly yet resolutely, turning fully to see Webb now with all eyes fixed on her alone rather than Mitchell. "He is not that man anymore." She paused briefly before adding quietly, but firmly, "Neither am I." The air was thick with the tension of unspoken truths and lingering regrets, as silence fell between them once more after Vex'ara's declaration, each word a testament to survival over destruction, hope rather than hate. Ryan's eyes met hers across Webb's imposing form standing in their way. In her gaze he saw recognition, mirrored back a mutual understanding that they had both changed irrevocably since war, torn through everything familiar before leaving behind only fragments of who each once was. "He is not," she repeated for good measure, offering Mitchell a silent yet powerful affirmation rather than any verbal defense against Webb's insinuations. Her hand still rested near where her weapon would be if on duty again, but this time it felt empty without its presence, as though acknowledging that battle had shifted into other realms now. Webb didn't seem inclined to move or back down despite those words hanging heavy in the air between them. He continued staring coldly at Vex'ara, then Mitchell, and finally he turned away abruptly, muttering under his breath something about calling military police before departing just as quickly without another word exchanged. Left alone once more within Ryan's small apartment, both warriors from different worlds remained standing close together, watching Webb leave into the night. The door closed with a soft click, but left an echo of tension and unresolved questions lingering between them instead. "I'm sorry," Vex'ara said after several long moments had passed in silence. It was not about regretting anything she did or felt necessary, rather acknowledging shared pain through empathy that went beyond any spoken explanation needed now to make sense of it all. Ryan shook his head slowly, but returned her gaze with equal resolve, burning brightly within tired green eyes that finally seemed less burdened by shadows cast from distant pasts. "Don't be," he told her quietly yet firmly, placing a hand on the small of her back, as if offering silent support now where none existed before when facing such challenges alone. She looked down at his touch, then lifted those same piercing amber orbs to meet his again, with a strange mix of gratitude and awe shining through. "We survived," she whispered finally, as understanding dawned between them anew like breaking day after darkest night's long hours spent in darkness. "Yeah," Ryan nodded once, voice steady despite everything laid bare now. "Let's keep surviving together." And so their fragile bond grew stronger under shared truths faced honestly and accepted fully, no matter what judgments or misunderstandings others might choose to impose upon them, moving forward into uncertain futures, yet promising hope beyond old wounds still healing. With renewed purpose, they stepped out of Ryan's apartment side by side once more, ready for whatever came next as two wounded souls finding unexpected kinship in each other's company, amidst uncharted territory, ahead where no map existed, but only paths forged through mutual understanding and shared resolve. Ryan and Vex'ara stood in a tense silence as Webb's footsteps echoed down the hallway outside Ryan's apartment door, growing fainter, but lingering like an unwanted specter over their fragile truce. The air was thick with uncertainty and unresolved tension. Each breath felt weighted by unspoken words. "Stay here," Webb commanded through the doorway just before he disappeared into the night, his voice a sharp reminder that they were not alone in this situation anymore. His parting words hung ominously, "I'm calling military police." Ryan's grip on the doorknob tightened reflexively as Vex'ara turned to face him fully once more. Her eyes, piercing and deep amber, met his with an unspoken acknowledgment of what was coming next. There would be no easy escape from this predicament. Their fates were now entwined in ways neither had anticipated when the first sparks of mutual recognition ignited between them. "Let me go," she offered quietly, after a few long moments stretched tautly between them like an invisible thread, pulling tight with every passing second. "I will take responsibility for any consequences that follow." Ryan snorted at her suggestion, but there was no humor in it this time around. The sound was more the bitter resignation of someone who had already accepted his fate too many times before. "Why bother?" he asked sharply, frustration evident in the tight set of his jaw and the way his eyes narrowed. "You think you can handle being alone better than me? Go ahead, see if it feels any different after all this time." Vex'ara's breath caught for a fleeting second at his biting words, but she didn't back down from him either. Instead, her shoulders squared, as if preparing herself mentally and physically against some unseen challenge waiting just beyond the horizon. "You are worth fighting for," she declared firmly instead of retreating under such verbal assault. Even now, a chill ran through Ryan's spine at those unexpected words, cold, but not without warmth hidden beneath the surface. For once, someone else was offering to stand beside him regardless of what he carried inside himself that others often rejected outright. "Look," Vex'ara began again after another tense pause had settled between them like a fog rolling in from sea before dawn breaks clear skies once more. "If you need time—" "No," he cut her off abruptly, shaking his head as if trying to dispel some lingering doubts clouding his thoughts and vision alike. There was something compelling about the way she held herself, no, not just stubbornly, but with an almost desperate resolve that mirrored his own buried beneath layers of years, old scars. Before either could say more or change their minds about whatever was unfolding, there came a sudden knock on Ryan's front door, interrupting any further attempts at communication. They both instinctively tensed up as Webb reappeared in the doorway looking grim-faced and resolute once more. "I've arranged for your detainment," he informed them curtly without preamble or unnecessary pleasantries. "Follow me." Ryan sighed deeply, resigning himself to whatever awaited him now outside these familiar walls that had become a temporary sanctuary, but no longer felt safe enough to hide within anymore. Vex'ara's hand found his arm almost instinctively, as if offering silent support before Webb led them away through the streets, still lit by Christmas lights twinkling softly in the night. Webb escorted Ryan and Vex'ara separately into adjacent holding cells deep beneath a nondescript government building not far from where they lived. The air here was cool, sterile, and devoid of any warmth or comfort typically associated with such places designed for confinement rather than rehabilitation or reflection. Ryan found himself alone inside one cell, while Webb stepped into the next space housing Vex'ara, but left them both connected via a thin concrete wall separating their individual confines, yet allowing voices to carry across easily. He knew she could hear every word of his side of this conversation too, as Webb began laying out accusations against her. "First, Commander Nighthollow," he started solemnly, "your presence here is highly unusual and under investigation for potential violations of both Nari regulations regarding unauthorized travel off-world and Earth's immigration laws." Vex'ara remained silent throughout his monologue initially, but when Webb paused long enough to take a breath, she finally spoke up. Her tone was calm yet measured, as if considering each word carefully before allowing it past lips that seemed unusually tight with tension right now. "Warrior Mitchell," she responded instead, addressing him directly despite the barrier between them suddenly feeling more significant than ever in this moment of potential crisis looming just beyond their control or influence any longer. "You have been a point of interest for your superiors too lately due to unexplained absences and recent performance evaluations reflecting decreased morale." A sharp bark of laughter escaped Ryan as he leaned against his cell wall with one hand braced behind him, fingers curling tightly into concrete beneath the weight of renewed anxiety coursing through veins. "Yeah," he scoffed bitterly. "You could say that." Webb's eyes narrowed at their exchange before continuing on to outline a series of further questions and statements regarding both parties' actions leading up to tonight's events. But Ryan tuned most of it out now, focused solely inward, as if trying desperately not to lose himself entirely amidst all these accusations swirling around them without clear answers. "Vex'ara," he called through the wall, after Webb finally stepped away, leaving her alone again. His voice was low and urgent, barely more than a whisper carried over short distance between cells, but resonating clearly inside his head too, now where no one else could hear it except possibly her, listening carefully beyond that thin barrier. "Yes, do you mean what you said earlier?" he asked bluntly without preamble or softening the question to ease any discomfort. "About being my partner." Vex'ara was quiet for a long moment before responding back through the wall, voice barely above a murmur, but filled with unexpected sincerity that made Ryan pause and listen harder even as his heart picked up pace from somewhere deep down. "I did," she affirmed finally, after what felt like an eternity stretching out between those two words echoing in silence. "I meant it." A shiver ran through him at her admission, part shock, part relief, but mostly something else entirely bubbling beneath surface emotions and defenses raised against getting hurt all over again anytime soon, if possible. "Then get us out of here," he said back immediately without hesitation or need for further explanation about why such requests seemed so urgent now given their current predicament. "We have a new year to celebrate." Through the thin concrete separating them, those last words carried across like an unspoken promise binding two souls together amidst ruins left behind by war and abandonment alike. They may yet face challenges far greater than mere misunderstandings or bureaucratic hurdles standing between them now, but neither was ready to turn away from that shared resolve any longer. Webb's footsteps echoed back down the hallway towards his office, once more leaving Ryan alone again within confines of this cell, looking out at a world beyond still lit by holiday cheer despite everything else happening inside. But somehow hope lingered stronger than fear for first time in long while as he waited with renewed purpose, ready to fight alongside someone who understood cost of survival better than anyone else ever could. Vex'ara stood similarly silent yet vigilant outside her own cell on other side, amber eyes reflecting same resolve seen through Ryan's tired green gaze earlier. She too had come far from place where once enemies clashed under orders, but here found kinship forged through mutual understanding, born out of shared pain and sacrifice carried within hearts weary beyond words. "Come morning," she whispered to herself, even as Ryan listened intently through wall dividing them, "we will break free together." And so their fragile bond grew stronger still in darkness, where no stars shone bright enough anymore except those inside minds forged anew amidst ashes left behind by wars long past. The dawn broke softly over the city outside Webb's office building, casting a pale light through the narrow windows of Ryan and Vex'ara's cells. The silence was thick, but within those small confines, the air buzzed with an unspoken tension and hope. As the first rays of sunlight filtered into the room, Ryan turned to face the wall separating him from Vex'ara, his eyes narrowing as he searched for any sign that she had heard his earlier plea. "Morning," he called softly through the thin barrier, almost testing if there was anyone on the other side, anyone who could still hear and understand him. The sound of footsteps in the hallway outside signaled Webb's approach once more, but this time Ryan didn't flinch as much. He felt a strange sense of calm settling over him, a resolve that nothing would break them now. Vex'ara responded almost immediately, her voice carrying through with a quiet strength that filled Ryan's chest with warmth despite the chill in his bones. "Morning," she said simply, but there was an undercurrent in those two words, a determination to face whatever came next together. Webb entered their cells shortly after, his demeanor as stern and uncompromising as ever. He approached Ryan first, eyeing him critically before turning towards Vex'ara's cell with a similar scrutinizing gaze. "You have visitors," he announced without preamble, causing both prisoners to stiffen in response. "Visitors?" Vex'ara echoed through the wall, her voice laced with confusion and wariness. Ryan felt his heart race as Webb produced 2 sets of documents from under his armor release form for each prisoner and began laying them out on a small table set up between their cells. "Yes," Webb confirmed gruffly but without hostility this time around. "Your charges are dropped pending further investigation." Ryan's mind raced, trying to process the sudden turn in events. It was as if they had been caught in some cruel joke, only for it all to unravel at once like a cheap illusion falling apart under scrutiny. "Further what?" Vex'ara asked through gritted teeth, clearly not ready to trust this unexpected reprieve yet. "We received new information," Webb replied, shuffling papers and looking decidedly uncomfortable. "Your identities have been verified by your respective governments." The relief washing over Ryan was almost too much to bear at first. It threatened to overwhelm him as quickly as the despair had earlier. He looked towards Vex'ara's cell through a narrow window set into the wall between them, his eyes meeting hers for just an instant. "Further investigation?" She pressed again with narrowed amber eyes and lips tight in suspicion. Webb sighed heavily before answering her unyielding gaze across both cells. "Yes," he admitted reluctantly, leaning against one of their cell doors. "New evidence suggests you were not only acting independently, but under orders from high-ranking officials who had legitimate reasons to distrust each other's governments." Ryan felt the pieces fall into place, even as confusion still lingered. He exchanged a look with Vex'ara once more through the small window, seeing in her eyes the same questions he was asking. "Your people have been seeking peaceful resolution," Webb continued, his voice softer now, almost apologetic for past misunderstandings and their consequences on innocent bystanders like Ryan and Vex'ara. "Intergalactic relations are fragile post-war, but your actions here prove you're willing to bridge that gap." Vex'ara's eyes narrowed further, as if trying to discern truth from the unexpected turn of events she was being handed without much warning or clarity yet. "Why not tell us this earlier?" Ryan interjected sharply through gritted teeth. He wasn't one for forgiveness, but he needed answers now more than ever after days of false starts and accusations. Webb's gaze met his squarely then, a mix of weariness and respect crossing over the veteran soldier's hardened demeanor. "Because it took time to verify all aspects of your stories," Webb admitted grimly before adding with unexpected sincerity, "and sometimes truth only reveals itself fully in silence." With that final admission hanging heavy between them, Webb left again without further explanation or ceremony this time around. The sudden quiet after his departure was deafening yet somehow liberating. Ryan's first instinct was to go back to Vex'ara once more and ask about the new turn of events, but something held him back, perhaps a lingering respect for her privacy, amidst all this unexpected chaos. Instead, he turned towards where Webb had set up their release forms with renewed purpose now that it seemed they could finally leave behind whatever nightmare had ensnared them. He signed his name on both documents without hesitation and reached out through the small window to slide Vex'ara's across her cell door for her signature as well. When she took a pen from Webb left behind and wrote her own consent, something shifted between them. No words needed now in this newfound understanding forged amidst ruins of old prejudices. "Ready?" he asked finally once both documents were complete, but lingering just outside his cell door, where it seemed appropriate given recent developments, yet too personal for mere strangers still getting acquainted under most circumstances. Vex'ara nodded tersely through the window, amber eyes reflecting a storm of emotions that Ryan knew all too well. Yes, she confirmed without additional explanation necessary between them anymore regarding their shared resolve to move forward now whatever else might come next together. Their release from captivity was swift, but not smooth. The bureaucratic dance still required before they could leave officially, on their own terms again, which left both feeling raw and exposed in aftermath of recent revelations about each other's true purpose here. Yet despite all this, a strange comfort settled over Ryan as Vex'ara walked beside him through the empty halls towards freedom once more. On New Year's Eve night, fall approached swiftly, but held no joy for those still reeling from unexpected turns they faced recently, save hope that fresh beginnings awaited them none the less amidst familiar city skyline lit by holiday cheer. They made their way out into streets alive with celebration and found a quiet spot overlooking the river where fireworks were set to start soon. Vex'ara stood beside Ryan as he watched colorful bursts light up darkening sky above water, reflecting back in mirror image of festive joy below, still foreign yet strangely comforting amidst all this uncertainty shared now between former adversaries, finding unexpected kinship through common understanding only survivors truly possess. "Thank you," she said softly. After a while, amber eyes steady on his face, though not meeting them fully just yet, "for believing I meant it." Ryan turned to look at her then, seeing in those piercing amber depths the same resolve and pain that mirrored inside him too, now more clearly than ever before under harsh light of war's aftermath shining down upon them both. "I believe you did," he answered equally quietly, but with clear sincerity, no longer cloaked behind defenses anymore. "We're not enemies anymore." A small smile played at corners of her mouth, then, something rare and precious breaking through layers built up over years in face of such loss and sorrow, they'd each known too well now. "No," she agreed, finally turning back towards where river reflected light above. "No, we are not." She took a breath, as if steeling herself for next step forward together, still fragile, but undeniable bond forming between them amidst wreckage left behind by wars long past. Slowly reaching out with one hand across space separating them, now just mere inches apart, no longer bars or walls standing in way anymore. "Partners?" she asked quietly, almost hesitantly, unsure perhaps if such intimacy belonged to those bound only through shared pain and survival instead of choice. Ryan's breath caught at her question, but not from fear this time. It was a relief far deeper than anything else felt, yet amidst all these shifting realities they faced together now. He looked down into palm that reached out towards him, then back up again, meeting Vex'ara's eyes with steady resolve born anew in aftermath of recent revelations. "Partners," he confirmed quietly, squeezing her hand gently but firmly, as if sealing oath already shared between them silently through actions rather than words alone, and a more needed when truth could speak so loudly now amidst ashes left behind by war and abandonment alike. And the fireworks lit up the night sky above, casting brilliant colors against dark clouds of recent misunderstandings and fears that had threatened to consume both Ryan and Vex'ara. They watched in silence for a moment longer before turning away from the river towards their new beginning. Through an unexpected journey they were ready to undertake side by side now whatever else lay ahead. In time, news spread through interspecies channels about two unlikely heroes, Ryan Mitchell and Commander Vex'ara Nighthollow, who had forged an unbreakable bond amidst ruins of war and mistrust. Their story inspired many across various worlds, still healing from past conflicts, towards hope for true reconciliation and peace, moving forward together rather than apart anymore. At their wedding, vows were simple yet profound, encapsulating journey that brought them here despite all odds we were enemies, they said side by side amidst guests of both human and alien races celebrating newfound kinship, born out mutual understanding through pain and sacrifice carried within hearts weary beyond words, but now finding strength in shared purpose anew. On their wall hung 2 medals, both earned at Kelly's station, where fates had first intertwined amidst chaos of war, each medal symbolizing not just individual honor won under orders given long ago, but also new partnership forged between human veteran and alien commander who found solace together amidst wreckage left behind by past conflicts, finally laid to rest, now moving forward towards brighter future shared side by side.